Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the STEM Space. I'm Natasha, and today we have another fabulous guest with us. Kai, welcome to the STEM Space.
Such a pleasure to be here with you today, Natasha.
So, you are with Mind Education. You're the senior director of product, and I was looking at what your company does, and one of the things I noticed was ST Math. And my daughter, who is a first grader, is assigned ST Math every week, and I know she loves it. So I was like, "Ooh, I'm gonna have to ask some questions," because she was like, "Oh my gosh, you're gonna talk to someone who created it." So let me just start with what is your company about?
Yeah, well, thrilled that your daughter uses the program my first grade daughter also does. So, Mind
Awesome.
Education we're actually a nonprofit neuroscience based organization. So, we were founded 25 years ago by professors from UC Irvine that were really focused on how do you use what they were studying at the time was spatial temporal thinking, and how do you infuse this spatial temporal reasoning to actually enhance mathematics education. So, over the past 25 years, we've been building math solutions particularly based on the way the brain learns, in order to build off of this spatial temporal understanding and fuel math understanding through that. And ST Math, as you discussed, is our flagship product, which has gone through 6 generations and is now in its 7th generation of development.
And what is your role as the senior, what was it, product director?
Yeah,
Director
so
of product. I
I've
flipped
got
it.
a pretty fun and unique role there. So it's my team that really builds out the program, the core of the program. So the entire student experience, everything that students actually engage in to learn mathematics is done by my team. I oversee a team of artists, game designers, product designers, curriculum designers, and UX researchers that all work together collaboratively in order to build. For those that don't know ST Math, it's a way of teaching math via puzzles where you're making everything visual. And it's very innovative, it's very unique. Oftentimes, when teachers will first see it, they say, I don't even understand it, I don't know what's happening. And that's part of the magic and the secret sauce of it. And it's a lot of fun and requires a lot of collaboration and problem solving.
Yeah, I had a guest earlier that was about math education, and the conversation was around math identity. And kids
Mm,
just don't like math and they're scared of
mm.
math. Um, so, what are some challenges that your team's trying to tackle around just learning math?
Sure. So I think a big part of that, right, has to do with how we're introduced to math. We think that math is numbers, right? Because
Right.
we record mathematics symbolically with numbers, we tend to associate, oh, math is numbers, right? And this is one of the things that we do really uniquely with ST Math is we actually, when we present problems, and this is as young as pre-K to students, there we actually start with problems with no numbers at all on the screen. And we use technology as a vehicle to support the teaching. So we will have purely visual scenarios that kids have never seen. You can imagine Gigi is our mascot, Gigi the penguin. You can imagine Gigi on some blocks, and then you can see there's a few other blocks that this tractor that Gigi is on is going to have to push against, and then you have to figure out the height of the total block stack. And so we create these mathematical scenarios that again don't have numbers, don't have the symbols at first. We then gradually introduce those. But by introducing it in a purely visual, contextualized way, you create a very engaging experience for students where they're excited, they're motivated, they're engaged, the same way that they are with a lot of games that kids love to play.
And I would love to discuss this link between mathematics and problem solving. So, I want to give you a little context here and a conversation we've had on the podcast. I did some research with engineering faculty, and I know your background's also in engineering, right?
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
And I had asked the engineering faculty, I showed them what we're doing in K-12 STEM education, particularly engineering education. And one of the biggest things that teachers are trying to do is problem-solving skills. And they're considering that to be design challenges. So how do we best solve some engineering problem, maybe like catapults or roller coasters or rockets, right? And so they're considering problem solving with iteration and thinking about different ideas and how do you optimize it. But the engineering faculty said, actually, what's really important for future engineers is mathematical problem solving.
Yeah.
And so they defined this word problem solving within a mathematical context. I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I love that. Well, first, I'll give you our kind of bent on problem solving. So our mission as a nonprofit, we have a mission we're working to achieve, is actually equipping all students to mathematically solve the world's most challenging problems. So
Love that.
the focus, even though we focus on math education, our focus is not on math. Our focus is actually on building problem solvers. And that's
Mm,
part of how I shared we present problems is they're not here's step 1, 2, and 3 of how you solve this problem. It's here's a novel, non-routine, original problem that you actually have to figure out that you're going to be learning mathematics through that. So when I think about, I mean, I think part of this is a historical context of what math used to be and what math is now. Historically, you learn math in order to be a calculator, right? But
right.
pre calculators, mathematics was the vehicle so that you could do calculation. And in that way, I mean, I guess you were problem solving in a micro context, but really you're just performing these rote calculations. And where you look at the heart of where math is going and the needs of it in today's modern age, the way you're using any math that you're doing in the world is in the context of some problem these days. Again, we have calculators that can just calculate. In order to actually utilize mathematics, there's a problem solving context that you're actually using those numbers for. So if you actually want to prepare our students for the 21st century and for the next generation, and specifically using mathematics in this generation, it has to be within the context of problem solving because that's how we're actually using and applying mathematics in our life. And I could go off on the value of problem solving. I mean, that's at the heart of every STEM career and most professional careers these days. Problem solving is really the core skill that's at the heart of it.
How does a teacher balance the standards that they have to teach, right? There are certain skills you have to teach in math, addition, subtraction, all the way to algebra, calculus, versus this idea of problem solving.
Mm-hmm. So this is where presenting math problems in a problem solving context or problem solving environment as a way of math instruction. I mean, this has been a growing body of research over the last 30 years about how you actually teach math more effectively, right? And I think traditionally what we've done is we've said, oh, well, if kids are going to learn math, we're going to tell them, step 1, step 2, step 3, and that's the way that we teach. And what we've actually found is that teaching through problem solving. So if I were to pick, let's say I wanted to teach something from 3rd grade fractions, right? Rather than presenting students with, I'll give you a problem like, here's what a half is, and I'm going to draw you a square, and I'm going to tell you this is a half and this is a third. What I could present as a question, and this is after kids have gotten a little bit of an introduction into fraction, is, well, when can a half be bigger than a whole, right? So it's this idea of presenting a mathematical idea, but within the context of some kind of problem. And I'll say one other thing too, because I have a lot of passion about this, and we'll see how much you want to dig into this. I think a lot of people are focused on like, well, if I'm going to introduce a problem, it has to be a real world problem, right? And this idea of real world problem solving. And I think real world problem solving is very important. We want to prepare kids to be able to solve real world problems in the world. However, in order to solve real world problems, it doesn't mean you actually have to be practiced and given those type of problems at an early age. What's often actually much more effective is presenting them with what we would call fake world, but meaningful problems, really rich and meaningful that are going to really engage students with where they're at. And then that's actually going to prepare them for later. Like one of my favorite problems is this problem of how many squares is on a chessboard. Love doing that in classes with kids, right? And there's obviously 64 individual squares, but then you've got what about the 2x2 squares? And what about the 3x3 squares? And it is one of the coolest, most engaging mathematical lessons. But there's no real world context for why you need to know how many squares are on a chessboard. However, that leads to such a rich and deep conversation and problem solving with students.
I love that. And I think that's so relevant for engineering STEM teachers because we often are said you need to tackle a real world engineering problem. And often they struggle with that because how is a kid supposed to tackle a robotic arm, something that actual engineers have trained to do, that is not appropriate for a third grade classroom. And so I want to unpack that some more, because the other argument I've heard, especially mathematics, is, well, I'm hearing meaningful, but also relevant to kids. Like, kids
Mhm.
want to know, why does math matter? Why is it important? So if we're putting in the real world component, they're like, well, this is why it matters. So I would love to hear more of your thoughts and ideas on that.
Totally. Yeah. I love how this is all so interconnected, right? So I think it's this idea, it's like kids aren't engaged in math. So to engage them in math, we have to show them that it's actually relevant to the real world, right? So of course,
Right.
engage. And I want to say there's nothing wrong with presenting real world problems, right? Real world problems are great. It's great to bring in that context. But I think where my pet peeve is where there tends to be a larger focus on the real world over the focus on meaningful problems. Okay? What kids care about is if the problem is meaningful for them, no matter what made up context there is, they are going to dive in and engage with it. It's why kids love stories. There's also a book that's called The Game Believes in You. And in this book, the author explores a bunch of different games, both non educational and educational, and talks about why kids are so engaged in games. And most games might have some real world context, but honestly, a lot of like the game my daughters are most into right now. I don't know if your kids played. This is a little block game on the App Store that's just about moving blocks and reordering them in the right configuration. But it's meaningful within its own context. It's a problem that they can understand, they can engage in meaningfully, and they can persevere through. And that's the most important thing, because when you present kids with problems like that, they want to engage, they'll keep engaging over and over. And so it's about, let's prioritize what makes it meaningful for kids, and what makes it a powerful problem is really the priority, especially at the younger ages.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And I think we often are just so overconsumed with workforce development, which is important. Um, but we think that's the carrot for the kids, right? Like, that's what's
Right.
going to get them excited. Like, someday you will be an engineer, right? And kids are like, I'm in third grade, I want to be a ballerina, you
Right.
know? But thinking about, like, my daughters, they love puzzles, and just this idea of solving a puzzle. Like, she loves ST math because of all these different games that she feels like she's playing a game. I think but that can be really hard as an adult to kind of remember what it's like to be a kid and to be curious. So do you kind of have any tips here to maybe bring in more of this game-based learning and fun component that's also teaching these important skills?
Yeah, well, I'll first give another example of it just to frame the mindset. Did you watch the movie? What was it called with Alan Turing? I'm totally blanking on the title, but
Mm.
it was with Alan Turing, the movie. It's, anyways, I'll tell the story about it. I'm totally blanking on the title of the movie, but um, oh no, not the Imitation Game. It might be the Imitation Game, I think.
Oh.
Anyways, this was so Alan Turing was recruiting the best
The
minds.
Imitation Game. Yes.
Imitation Game, there we go. Was
Yeah.
recruiting the best minds in order to solve the most challenging problem at that point in time, which was breaking the Nazi code, right? And do you know what one of his core recruiting methods was in order to find recruits? It wasn't
Mm.
going to the top universities. It wasn't finding the top engineers. It was putting out a extremely difficult crossword puzzle in the newspaper, and finding people that were really good at solving that puzzle. Because if they could solve a really challenging puzzle, those skills translated 100% to breaking this very real world problem. Um, so yeah, I think a big part of it is there's this tendency of thinking about that the training always has to look like what the outcome is. And I live in Southern California. I'm a big beach person and a surfer. You know, another example of this is if you want to, I actually taught surfing for years in high school. If you want to get someone to be really good at surfing, don't start teaching them surfing, right? You start by getting them comfortable in the water, body surfing with waves, get really good at boogie boarding, because boogie boarding, you're going to learn so many fundamental mechanics that are needed of how do you catch a wave, how do you read a wave, how do you drop into the wave. And so I think there can be so much this push to like try to get to the end zone rather than thinking about, well, what are the fundamentals that are needed? in order to move there. Another example would be just playing with balls as a young kid. You want to be great at playing baseball or playing soccer. Don't start drills at 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah.
Start by just playing with balls. And so this idea of engaging in play and play being a vehicle for learning is actually the most powerful vehicles. And I understand the challenges is when you do have standards that you do need to teach and hit, it's like, well, how do I balance the standards with letting kids engage in play? But I think it's this understanding of what's needed now to get the best training does not necessarily look like what you're actually training them for, that there's so many qualities and aspects that you're training in order to actually get them towards a future outcome.
How do you foresee AI changing math education?
AI is an amazing tool. I use it already. We've used it internally, but it is a problem solving tool. It is not a replacement for people, right? So just like with computers and just like calculators are an amazing tool. They allow you to do more problem solving than you can do without a calculator. AI is going to be the same thing, right? I can take a really challenging problem, use an AI tool in order to help me solve it. However, what I can't do is I still have to have the ability to say, is what the AI is spitting out correct? Or
Right.
is it not? And I need to be able to have that filter. And so this goes back to the importance of conceptual understanding, having a really broad schema. But I see it being as a tool in education. And I will tell you the biggest challenge, as there's so many discussions around AI these days, is how do we actually use AI not as some flashy thing, but to actually make learning better, to actually have kids learn faster, deeper. And so many uses of AI tools right now aren't actually fundamentally achieving that.
Yeah. And I think one concern I've heard from teachers, there's a trend for schools to start using AI plus game-based learning to replace the teacher. And so you're just putting kids in front of computers and using programs like math programs that differentiate based on what the students are learning. And it seems great in principle, but I know that's not the full picture. So I want to hear kind of your thoughts on like, what is the role of the teacher? Why is the teacher important in a math classroom?
Sure. I mean, I heard this a long time ago that like teaching and learning is a human centric experience, right? You can never replace an individual as a teacher. You look at those who have learned the best in our society, they always have mentors or trainers or teachers. That's never going to go away. Um, Again, I think about it as a tool. How can I use, so like ST Math is a great example. One thing that's very challenging as a teacher is how do I deeply engage all of my students on different tasks based on where they're at, letting them progress in a mastery driven way and provide them feedback. That's one of the things that's really unique about ST Math is the visual formative feedback that we provide and provide feedback to all 30 kids at a time. So that is a phenomenal tool that if I were in a first grade classroom right now, I would definitely want to be using as a component to assist in aiding instruction. But that's where I'm then going to build off of what they're learning. I'm going to clarify misconceptions. We're going to engage in puzzle talks and have discussions about puzzles that they're doing. And I mean, fundamentally, teaching and learning is a human endeavor, and you won't replace people.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how at my daughter's school, it's added as a supplement. So they have 20 minutes where they're using SD Math to support the
Mhm.
instruction that's happening in the classroom. And it's been really awesome to see kind of being able to check her progress and areas that she needs support in, and just how much she's loved math from using this game. So, I mean, I think what you guys are doing is awesome. And I want to ask you one final question here. What's next? Are there any kind of exciting projects in the works in mind education?
Yeah, well, we're actually at a very exciting time. So, we have primarily been a supplement organization in that we've built supplemental programs. Actually, we do have a pre K program and a summer school program, which are great. But we are now launching and we have officially built our core curriculum. So, this is a
Oh,
full classroom curriculum. This utilizes our games within the context of lessons. This allows kids to interact with the teacher and other students. And it's called Insight Math. It's for kindergarten through sixth grade. and we're super excited about it, and engaging in presentations and conversations at this very point in time.
That's awesome. Okay, now I have to ask one more question. I said that was the last
Please
one.
ask away.
Okay. Well, I know you have young daughters.
Yeah.
What's like your hope for education? Because I have to say, right now we're in this like very turbulent time with education, and it's so much is changing. I'm in Texas. A lot of things are being taken away from teachers' autonomy, and we're not in a great place. And so I'm hoping with this podcast, I can kind of be a voice for teachers. And like, what advice do you have for teachers? And kind of like, what's your hope for the future of education?
Yeah, gosh, that is such a big question. I love it
I was,
though.
yeah, I know.
I, yeah, I mean, my hope and dream, I mean, this is part of why I do the work that I do, is I think learning, you learn through experience. You don't learn by being told, you learn through experience. It's, as we have a quote as well, whoever's doing the talking is doing the learning. Kids need to be the ones doing the talking. And my hope and dream for education is that our classrooms are student centric. Kids have the opportunity to solve problems, to persevere, to try things, to fail a bunch. I think really embracing a problem solving mindset in the classroom and that problem solving culture, that math is not about answer getting, and it's about trying and solving and failing, and giving kids tons of room to fail, which means we also need to give teachers tons of room to fail. And I know teachers are totally strapped right now. They're strapped for time. They're being told so many different things. I mean, it is a challenging time to be an educator, but I think if you really continue to focus on wanting to do what's best for students and really making that classroom centered around how do I create a rich environment for these students to learn and grow, I mean, that's what we can focus on. And what we try to do is how do we develop tools and programs that can help support teachers in doing that, because it's a very daunting task to do on your own.
I love it. That was a great answer for a big question. But
Amazing.
I appreciate you being here. We will link in the show notes all about Mind Education if any listeners want to learn more about SD Math and then this new curriculum that's coming out. But thank you again for joining me today on the STEM space.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun. Enjoyed it,
All right.
Natasha.
Bye-bye.
Bye.